1532. In the Archives of Seville, we found the diary of Mateo de Alarcon, a doctor who, amidst the gold and blood of the New World, sought not treasures, but a way to save his soul. This is the story of a life forged by mercy and a great love.
If these accords ever fall into the hands of a person in sunny Spain, know this: the gold they sing about on every corner in Cadiz is only yellow sand, mixed with human despair. My name is Mateo. I was born in Seville, into a family where every man had to either wear a robe or hold a sword. I chose a third way, which my father deemed vulgar and unworthy of a nobleman. I chose healing. I remember the halls of the university in Salamanca, the smell of parchment, dried herbs, and the cold stone of the anatomy theaters. My teacher told me, "Mateo, the body is a temple, but sometimes, to save the temple, you must dirty your hands." Back then, I did not know how deeply I would have to sink into this filth. I believed in science, in the power of Hippocrates, and that every life had weight. I was a naive fool who thought the world could be cured with a lancet and a prayer. I did not set sail for the new world, seeking golden cities of El Dorado. I was running from the Inquisition, which began asking too many questions about my books on anatomy, and from a girl whose heart I could not save from the consumption. The ocean seemed like a great cleansing, but it became the first circle of hell. 72 days, we cleaved the waters of the Atlantic on the ship Santa Maria. Do you know what they do not write in reports for the Crown? About the stench in the hold, where 150 men eat biscuits H-alpha mixed with rat droppings for months. I was the only medic on board. While the officers drank wine and dreamed of slaves, I cut off fingers, turned blue from scurvy, and listened to grown men cry in pain, spitting their own teeth directly into the sea foam. I held no weapon. My only ally was a bag of tools and a tincture of opium that ran out on the 40th day of the journey. When we finally saw land, those green, lush shores of Yucatan, I fell on my knees and kissed the sand. It felt like paradise. The air smelled of flowers I had never seen, and of wet earth that promised life. But paradise ended as soon as our captain, Diego de Vega, stepped ashore. Diego was a man who saw only lumber for gallows in the trees, and only labor or targets for muskets in the people. The first thing I did in this new world was not raise a cross or claim land for the Spanish king. I began digging graves for my own countrymen. The jungle was treacherous. Fever mowed us down faster than Indian arrows. I saw strong men, hardened in battle, turn into trembling heaps of flesh, deliriously dreaming of their home villages in Castile. I sat with them at night, sweating away insects from their faces, feeling my own helplessness. The science of Salamanca was powerless against the spirits of these forests. And then the war began, though it is hard to call it a war. It was a slaughter. The conquistadors went through the villages like locusts. I saw maize fields burned, temples that took centuries to build razed to the ground. Diego de Vega laughed, saying, "Mateo, do not waste your bandages on these savages. They have no souls." But I looked into their eyes. In the eyes of an Indian dying from a wound to the belly, there was as much pain and thirst for life as in the eyes of any grandee of Spain. I began treating them secretly. At first, it was children found in the woods then, wounded warriors whom our soldiers left for death. I studied their herbs. It turned out that these savages knew more about the forest than all my professors put together. I became a bridge between two worlds that no one asked to build. My comrades began to look at me sideways. The doctor who kisses the hands of heathens, they whispered behind my back. I felt LONLNS clench my throat. I wasn't Spaniard, but I no longer felt part of this invading army. I was a medic, but I could not stop the epidemic of cruelty that spread around us. I often sat on the river bank in the evenings. The water was black as tar, and the stars in the sky seemed foreign. I thought my life was a mistake. that I sailed here only to witness the end of the world. I did not know that the jungle was already preparing an answer for me, that among this chaos, among the ash of burned villages, I would meet her, the one who would make me believe again that life is not just a series of suffering. 1500 THRTTWO was the year of my greatest fear and my greatest discovery. I was Mateo de Alarcon, a man without a sword in a land of murderers, and I was ready to die of LNLNS until she stepped out from the shadows of the tropic forest. Her gaze was filled with hatred for my armor, but her hands needed my help. That night I understood. To save another, sometimes you must become an enemy to your own. Fate had set its traps. We were sailing into the very heart of darkness, not knowing that there, deep in the forests, love was waiting for me. A love that smells of blood and freedom. The jungle is not just a forest. It is a living, breathing wall that either accepts you or chews you up and spits your bones into the mud. In 1500 THRTTWO, these thickets were filled not only with the screams of parrots, but with the groans of those who fell victim to the Spanish appetite for gold. I remember that evening, when the sky over the coast turned purple, and the air was so heavy you could cut it with a knife. It happened after another raid by Diego de Vega. Our noble knights returned from the forest, dragging baskets of stolen jewelry and bound prisoners. Diego was in high spirits. He drank sour wine and laughed, telling how easily the muskets pierced the leather shields of the Indians. I stood aside, washing my tools, feeling everything inside me re and k with disgust. These men thought themselves bringers of civilization, but in that moment, they were just drunken emiat cleavers. I decided to go to the river to fetch fresh water for my bag of tinctures. I walked half a mile from the camp, to where the ferns were so high they blocked the sun, and that is where I found her. She was lying in the bushes, clutching a wound on her shoulder. Her dress of white cotton was soaked in blood, and her eyes gods. I had already seen those eyes in my hallucinations. She did not howl in pain, though the wound was deep. A bullet from a Spanish weapon had torn through her flesh. She looked at me with such a concentration of hatred and fear that I froze for a moment. This was Itzel. Her name in the tongue of her people meant moon. And that evening, she was the only light in this hell. I took a step forward, and she tried to crawl away, though every second of movement cost her agony. I raised my hands high, showing there was no sword. I simply opened my bag and took out a clean linen bandage. "Tranquila," I whispered, knowing she did not understand Spanish. "I am a doctor. I will not kill you." In that minute, I signed my own death warrant before the crown of Spain. By the laws of our camp, I should have either finished her off or brought her as a slave for the mines. But I saw her fingers. They were calloused, but not from heavy labor, but from constant work with roots and leaves. On her belt hung a small leather bag, identical to mine, only sewn from the rough skin of a jaguar. She was a healer too. We were colleagues, divided by an ocean of hatred and hundreds of years of different faiths. I treated her wound. My hands trembled not from fear, but from how her skin, the color of hot bronze, reacted to my touch. She gritted her teeth so hard the veins protruded on her neck, but she did not make a sound. She was proud, like this very land. When I finished, she simply pointed to the thicket, letting me know she wanted to leave. I nodded and helped her up. She disappeared into the forest like a shadow, without saying a single word, but leaving a hole in my heart that all the bandages of Salamanca could not patch. For the next 2 weeks, I lived as if in a fever. By day, I extracted splinters from the fat rears of Spanish officers and treated ringworm and soldiers, and in the evenings, I went to that same river. I left gifts on a large flat stone, biscuits, dried fruits, pieces of soap. Sometimes I found wild orchids in their place, or fruits unknown to me that smelled of honey and sun. This was our secret dialogue, a dialogue of 2 people who had no right even to a glance. On the 20th day, she came out to me herself. She stood in the shadow of a great tree, looking much better. Her arm no longer hung like a whip. She came closer, and I felt the scent of her hair, wild vanilla and rain. Itzel touched my hand with her thin, cool palm and whispered a word I remembered for the rest of my life. Kuj, God. I shook my head and pointed to my feet in dirty boots. Mateo, I said, pressing my hand to my chest. Man, just a man. We began meeting every night. Do you know what it is like to love a woman whose people your brothers consider animals? It is like walking on thin ice over an abyss. We hid in a cave behind a waterfall, where Spanish patrols did not dare to go, fearing legends of forest spirits. There, under the roar of the water, we learned to understand each other. I taught her Spanish words, and she taught me the language of the jungle. It turned out that Itzel was the daughter of a local elder whose village we burned 3 months ago. Her father had died. Her sisters were taken into slavery. She should have hated me with every fiber of her soul. But when she looked at me, I saw not an enemy. I saw the same tired soul seeking peace in the middle of a storm. Our nights were filled not only with talk. There was passion that was vulgar in its PRIMLNS and pure in its honesty. We made love on a bed of dry leaves, and I forgot about Spain, about the king, about the Inquisition. Her body was to me a map of a new world, far more valuable than the one drawn by cartographers in Madrid. I kissed her scars, and she touched my hands, wondering why they were so soft, though I was a man. It was dangerous to the point of madness. Diego de Vega began to suspect something. He noticed that my gaze always wandered somewhere into the forest, and that I had begun spending too many medical supplies. Our good Dr. Mateo, he said one morning, cleaning blood from under his nails with his dagger. They say you go into the forest for new herbs. But watch out, lest the jungle eat you along with your herbs. We are not in Castile here, doctor. Here, every branch can become a gallows. He was right. The social injustice of that time was absolute. A Spaniard who loves an Indian woman, this is not just a scandal. It is a crime against faith and the state. For the soldiers, she was only a pieza, piece of meat for pleasure. If they had found out that I fell on my knees before this woman to heal her feet, they would have torn us both to pieces right on the central square of our temporary fort. But Itzel taught me differently. She showed me that gold is only a shiny stone that the Indians brought to the gods as a symbol of the sun, not as a means to buy palaces. She taught me how to listen to the forest. She told me of great civilizations that were here for thousands of years before the first Spanish ship appeared on the horizon. I realized that we brought not light here, but darkness wrapped in gold foil. Once we sat in our cave, and she brought me a drink made from cacao beans mixed with bitter pepper. It was just like our life, bitter, sharp, but incredibly delicious. Mateo, she said, already quite skilled in my language. If your captain finds out, he will kill you. Why do you not flee with me? Deep in the forest, there are places where Spanish boots have never trumped the ground. I hesitated. I was a Spaniard. My life was bound to those people in the camp, however cruel they were. I had the duty of a doctor. But when I looked at her face, at those lips that smelled of the forest, and at those eyes in which I saw my true reflection, I understood my duty as her. Throughout these months, I witnessed incredible cruelties. I saw hands chopped off for one stolen fruit. I saw priests baptizing dying children, while a minute later their parents received whiplashes for not collecting maize on time. It was hell on earth, and I was part of it. I was the doctor who maintained life in the invaders so that they could kill further. This dilemma rent me apart. Our meetings became more desperate. We understood that each time could be the last. We developed a system of signs. A broken mahogany branch near the entrance to the camp meant danger. A blue parrot feather meant wait for me. One evening, when the moon was especially bright, the Indians called such a moon the jaguar moon. we were especially careless. We lingered by the river, watching the fireflies create the illusion of a starry sky on the surface of the water. I held her hands, and we were planning our escape for the following week. We wanted to go west, to the great mountains where, according to Itzel, her relatives lived. Suddenly, we heard the crunch of a dry branch. I instantly covered Itzel with my body, my hand reaching for the knife, though I had never killed. From the shadows stepped Sergeant Lopez, Diego de Vega's right hand. He looked at us with a mixture of disgust and lustful pleasure. "Oh, our holy Dr. Mateo," he drawled, spitting on the ground. "So this is where our bandages and wine disappear. You share a bed with a heathen while we shed blood for your Spain." Itzel wanted to leap at him with her stone knife, but I held her back. I knew, if Lopez fired his musket, it would be the end for both. "Lopez," I said, trying to keep my voice from trembling. "She has done nothing wrong. She is my patient." "Patient?" Lopez laughed, and the sound was like the crunch of gravel. "I see how you treat her. Diego will be very surprised to learn that his doctor is a traitor to the faith. But know what? I can keep silent, if you let me try this medicine just for one night." In that moment, I realized that being a doctor is not always about saving life. Sometimes it means protecting it at any cost. I felt for the first time in my life not mercy, but pure, black rage born in my heart. I did not strike him. I did something worse. I knew that Lopez suffered from chronic stomach pain, and I had been giving him opium tincture. "Lopez," I said, stepping closer, "you know that I am the only one who can tame your pain. If you open your mouth, the next dose of your medicine will contain not only opium, but something of what Itzel has taught me to gather in the forest. It will not be death, no. It will be a week of unceasing vomiting and convulsions, from which you will beg for a knife in the throat." Lopez shuddered. He was a coward like all sadists. He muttered some curse and disappeared into the forest. I knew he would tell anyway, but it gave us a little time. That night we did not sleep. We sat, pressed against each other, listening to the jungle breathing around us. The world was unfair, cruel, and dirty. But in this darkness, in this damp cave, I felt more of a Spaniard than ever, not by passport or blood, but by the capacity for a true choice. We signed our own sentence. 1500 THRDTWO was preparing to test us with fire and diseases. I was Mateo de Alarcon, the doctor who chose love over homeland. And I knew, ahead of us lay only one road, the road through death to freedom. The jungle was silent, but I felt the jaguar nearby preparing to leap. It was our time, the time when every second was more precious than all the gold of the Incas. They say hell is a place underground where fire burns. A lie. Hell came to the jungles of Yucatan on the boats of my countrymen. 1533 was the year when the heavens closed for both of us, and the earth was soaked in filth and despair. Lopez did not lie. He was not a man of his word. He was a man of fear and bile. The morning after our meeting by the river, they came for me. I was not arrested with honor. Diego de Vega simply ordered his dogs to drag me out of my tent by the hair, directly into the mud of the fort's central square. My medical books, my herbariums, my records of local plants, all of it was thrown into the fire before my very eyes. "You betrayed your own blood, Mateo," Diego said, looking down at me from his horse. "You treated heathens with our medicines. You shared a bed with a creature who has no soul. In Spain, they would have burned you at the stake. Here, I will simply let you watch the Alvarito you love die." I was thrown into a wooden cage under the burning sun, without water, without food, swarmed by flies. I saw them preparing a punitive raid on Itzel's village. I screamed until my voice turned into a wheeze. I beat against the bars until my hands bled, but the only response I received was the laughter of soldiers and the spit in my face from Lopez. But the God in whom they believed so sincerely before every killing had his own plan. Death came to our camp not with the swords of the Indians. It came silently, in the seams of the soldiers' dirty clothes, and in the breath of sick sailors. The black pox, viruela, as we called it. First, one musketeer fell ill, then two. 3 days later, the camp turned into a hospital where there was no one left to heal. Bodies were covered in horrible sores, eyes filled with blood, and the stench of rotting flesh became stronger than the smell of the jungle. The conquistadors, who only yesterday thought themselves gods, now lay in their own filth, begging for mercy. Diego de Vega came to my cage on the 5th day. His face was already covered in red spots, and his hands trembled. "Let him out," he rasped to the guard. "Mateo, you are a doctor. Save us. I will give you all the gold you desire." I looked at him, and for the first time in my life, felt not pity, but cold, ice-like disgust. "Gold does not cure the viruela, Diego," I said, walking out of the cage. "It cannot be applied to a wound. You brought this death here, and now it has come for its share." I began to work, not for them, but because I could not do otherwise. But the true horror awaited me ahead. The disease spread to the forest. For the Indians, who had never known this filth, the black pox became a death sentence. They died in entire families within 2 days. What the Spanish swords did not do, Spanish blood finished. I fled the camp at night, taking the remains of my medicines. I ran through the forest, stumbling over roots, praying to all gods, both mine and Itzel's, just to be in time. When I reached our cave behind the waterfall, my heart almost stopped. She lay there. Her breathing was shallow, and her skin, which once smelled of vanilla, was now hot as arete charcoal. The first sores had already appeared on her face. Itzel did not recognize me. She was delirious, calling for her father and begging the fire not to take her forest. These were the worst days of my life. I sat by her in this damp cave, covering her body with cold moss, pouring water into her mouth drop by drop. I used Iaveritechenji I knew, Spanish science, and the secret knowledge of Indian herbalists. I made cuts on my own body to mix my blood with the bruise, believing in some mad alchemy of love. Around us in the forest, there was silence. The birds stopped singing. The world was dying. I held her hand and felt life draining out of her, like sand through fingers. At some point, I gave up. I fell to my knees beside her bed and began to howl like a wounded beast. I cursed Spain. I cursed my profession. I cursed the day I first stepped onto this cursed shore. Take me instead of her. I screamed into the darkness. I have seen too much death. I deserve this. On the 3rd night, she stopped breathing. For a few seconds, an absolute, Giarava-like silence fell in the cave. I leaned over her, ready to close her eyes forever. And in that moment, I felt a faint, barely noticeable movement of her chest. It was not a breath. It was a miracle. The fever suddenly retreated, leaving her exhausted, dead, but alive. The viruela, which had taken thousands around us, Machao decided to let this woman go. Maybe her spirit was too strong for this disease, or maybe my black prayer was heard. For the next 2 weeks, I nursed her like a child. We were 2 ghosts among the ruins of the world. The Spanish fort was empty. Those who did not die had fled on the ships, leaving the sick to the mercy of the jungle. Diego de Vega died in agony, calling for a mother he had not seen in 20 years. Lopez disappeared into the forest, and I hope the jaguars were more merciful to him than he was to people. We were left alone, without a homeland, without friends, with bodies covered in scars from the black pox. But when Itzel first opened her eyes and recognized me, when she whispered my name with her broken voice, I understood. We had walked through hell and came out on the other side. This was our catharsis. We lost all our past, but gained a chance for a future, for which we paid the highest price. 1533 took away my faith in kings and flags, but gave me the knowledge that love is the only thing that can survive even when the world around you turns to ash. I held her in my arms at the entrance to the cave, watching the first ray of sun after the great darkness. We were weak, we were broken, but we breathed the same air. And in this air, it no longer smelled of death. It smelled of hope, which was sharper than any knife. We did not wait for new Spanish sails to appear on the horizon. I knew, where there's gold, there will always be new Diego de Vegas, hungry for the blood of others and their maize. When Itzel was able to take her first 10 steps without my help, we gathered the little we had, my surviving surgical knives, a bag of seeds, and a large dose of stubbornness, and went west, into the very heart of the mountain range, where the clouds kissed the tops of the trees. 3 months we walked. My boots fell apart on the 40th day, and for the first time, I felt the earth with my bare feet. You know, it was a strange feeling, as if I had finally stopped being a stranger trampling this land, and became part of it. We fed on roots, wild honey, and what Itzel taught me to find in the thicket. She was no longer my patient. She was my guide, my strength, my life. We found our valley at an elevation of 2,000 meters above sea level. It was a hidden paradise, surrounded by rocks, with a crystal-clear river and earth that was so black and rich it seemed alive. There we built our first hut. It was crooked, with a roof made of palm leaves, but to us, it was grander than the Alhambra Palace in Granada. And here, the twist happened that I could never have expected. Remember, I told you I fled Spain because my father, the Count de Alarcon, considered my medical practice vulgar? It turned out he was not just looking for me. After 2 years of our life in the mountains, a lonely Spaniard wandered into our settlement, a deserter dying of hunger. When I healed him, he told me that all along the coast they were searching for the holy doctor who had supposedly stolen the treasures of the Indians. My father had died, leaving me a vast inheritance and a title, but on the condition that I return and cleanse the family name. I looked at my hands, tanned, covered in scars, dirty with earth and the juice of healing herbs, and I simply laughed. I realized that I already had my inheritance. She was sitting beside me, grinding maize on a stone, and in her belly, our first child was already kicking. I asked the deserter to take my diary and my family ring, reach the port, and pass on the news to any ship bound for Cadiz that Mateo de Alarcon had died of the black pox in the jungles of Yucatan. It was my last lie and my greatest truth. I officially died for Spain, so that I could finally be born as a human. We lived in this valley for 38 years. In that time, our lonely campfire turned into a small settlement. Those who had no place in the new Spanish order, nor in the remains of Indian tribes, came to us. We created a community of lost souls. I taught them Buarapian anatomy and hygiene. Itzel taught them the language of the forest. We forged a medicine the world had never seen, a fusion of science and nature, where the knife did not go against the spirit. We had 5 children, 3 sons and 2 daughters. They were beautiful, with skin the color of morning coffee, and eyes were the amber of Indian gods mixed with the blue of the Spanish sky. My eldest son, Diego, yes, I named him after the captain to remind myself what kind of man not to be, became the best doctor in these mountains. He does not know what Madrid is, but he knows how to stop bleeding with spider webs and tree bark. Itzel, she was my heir until the very last breath. Even when her hair became silver and her face was covered in a network of wrinkles, she remained that same girl from under the waterfall. We often sat on the rock, watching the sunset, and I thanked every stormy wave of the Atlantic for washing me onto this shore. She passed away 3 years ago, quietly, holding my hand, as if simply walking into another room of our cave. Now I am 70 years old. My fingers are no longer so skilled with the scalpel, and my eyes see the world a bit blurry. But I do not feel lonely. I look at my grandchildren, there are 12 of them now, and I see in them the future of this continent. They are neither invaders nor victims. They are something entirely new. They are the seeds I sowed in the ash of war, and they have given the most beautiful fruits. Do not seek the truth in history books, where they only write about conquests and kings. The real history is written in hospitals and cradles, and in secret meetings under the jaguar moon. The world is an unfair, often vulgar, and cruel place where souls are sold for gold. But each of you has a choice, to be a sword or a bandage. My time is drawing to an end. The sun is already touching the peaks of the rocks. I close this last notebook and place it in a lead box. Perhaps in 500 years, someone will find these words and understand. One can walk through the hell of colonization and not stain hands with blood. One can love so desperately that even death will retreat, astonished by your audacity. I am not afraid. I am simply going to her. We will go to the river again, and I will again marvel at the scent of vanilla in her hair. Be happy, traveler, whoever you may be. Search for your paradise not on maps, but within yourself. It is the only thing that matters at the end of the